Okay, so hi everyone. Just to welcome everyone who just joined in the Zoom meeting. This is actually one of our very popular seminar series that talks about going to university and applying UCAS, which is the university admission system. I think I want a break this year. So this year we got the expert. I must say he's really the expert, Daniel Labriola. And he's going to talk to you about the university admission system. And just for those who cannot catch up with, for example, because of an English problem, etc., this is going to be recorded and uploaded to YouTube. And then YouTube will have an automatic subtitle function to attach on. So don't worry too much if you think you cannot understand or fully understand, it's fine. And just a reminder, if you got any questions, please WhatsApp Candy. Candy is going to send it to us and I will read out the questions at the end. So all to you, Daniel. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Eve. I'm glad I could sort of give you a break, I guess is the bottom line here. My name is Dr. Daniele Labriola, Dan, please. Otherwise, Dr. Dan. I am an education consultant, and I have been a consultant now for a number of years, formally going back over 7. Before then, I was a university lecturer in philosophy. I taught at the University of London. I also had an appointment with New York University, NYU, at their London campus, teaching philosophy. I graduated, now this is really sort of going back now, I did my undergraduate at UC Berkeley in the States, and I did my master's and my PhD at St. Andrews. So over the years, sort of going back all the way to the start of my university education, I feel I've been rather fortunate in the sense that I've been able to pick up on the different systems, compare and contrast, and learn what works, what doesn't. I've also had the fortune of actually teaching in both systems. And I feel like that has really sort of helped with my own personal sort of philosophy and my own personal practices as a consultant. So I'm very happy to be here today, and obviously on behalf of Elite Anglo Chinese Services, give an overview of, in particular, the UK system. That's our focus today for a number of different obvious reasons, given our audience here. As Eve said, of course, there will be a nice little Q&A session at the end. So please, any questions, simple, hard, personal, impersonal, it doesn't really matter. I much prefer, I have to admit, talking sort of off the cuff as opposed to going off of slides, but we got to get the nitty gritty done first. So without any further ado, I'm going to take this slide by slide and see where we get to by the end. Oops. There we go. So let's start with the timetable. And I mentioned, sorry, I should start from the very beginning here, UCAS. UCAS is the centralized application system for the UK, particularly for its undergraduate, its Bachelor's of Arts, its Bachelor's of Science, and other specialized engineering, law, medicine courses of that sort. In essence, it's a one-stop shop where the student uploads their work, academic history, personal statement, etc., identifies their choices, and applies to universities via this platform here. And that's hence the focus of, in particular, this presentation today, the UCAS, the centralized application system. It's good to sort of, right off the bat here, look at a timetable in line with when to be preparing for the UCAS application, when to be preparing for submitting it, of course. What we've done is sort of broken it up between lower and upper sixth, so the last 2 years of high school, in particular in the British curriculum. And it's a nice, as it were, primer here to really start getting certain questions thrown out at both the student, of course, and the family. And we'll see why, because, you think, well, March, it seems to be quite a ways away of one's lower sixth, but after everything is said and done, including current workload, any summer engagements, et cetera, the intention perhaps to apply for a specialized course or Oxford or Cambridge, we'll see that lower sixth comes and goes. And at almost the very start of upper sixth, a student might find themselves already having to put together and submit their application. So to that end, what we do normally advise is between lower sixth March and September of lower sixth is to really start deciding on subjects in university. And we'll go into a bit more detail on what we mean here. Of course, keep in mind, as I just alluded to, certain deadlines, right? So if we're looking at medicine or Oxbridge in particular, we have an October deadline. In addition to the actual application, we might also have additional entrance exams. We also need to budget for interview preparation, the interviews themselves coming towards the end of the month, the end of the calendar year, excuse me. Also looking beyond the application submission date, upper sixth, January to March, is when very typically at that point we should be hearing back. And the student and the family should accordingly be answering certain questions, namely, what's on the table? Are the offers, and they're normally conditional. Again, we'll get into that in a minute by what we mean in detail. Are the offers realizable? Can we meet them? Has my son or daughter ultimately worked in line with the school's predictions here, and accordingly the offers that have been set down by the university? They might have a few months before ultimately answering yes or no to that. Looking ultimately then at August, the A-level results day, and what that ultimately means when an offer might go from conditional to unconditional, or an offer might be failed and the student and the family accordingly find themselves wondering, what do we do next? And beyond that, ultimately matriculation, enrollment into the university, September onwards. So these are sort of the key milestones, right? And throughout this talk, we're going to be talking about certain particular sort of aspects or things to do within some of these milestones, within some of these key stages of the application process. So we mentioned earlier the subject issue, subject in university. I think particularly with reference to the UK, I would argue that a subject choice is more important than a university choice, at least initially, for two reasons. One is the UCAS system, and so accordingly the United Kingdom higher education system, the sort of policy, as it were, that it has via UCAS, is that a student is in essence applying firstly for a particular subject, course, or degree, a bachelor's. And secondly, as it were, at the particular university in which or through which that course is offered, okay? And this is reflected in the actual format of the application itself, and most particularly the personal statement. Again, something we'll go into in a minute here. The statement, and it's just one essay of about 47 lines, 4,000 characters, is in so many words a justification for applying to university. And I say to university, but when you actually look at the minutia, you realize that the argument isn't because it's one application essay for 5 different university choices here. It isn't an argument for why I, as the student, should be accepted at your specific university. It's why I, as a student, should be accepted at university level in the UK for a specific course of studies, engineering, philosophy, maths, law, what have you. It doesn't necessarily matter, okay? So knowing, as it were, the actual rigidity of the application process, the fact that in essence what you're limited to is really a sole or a subject, and once the decision for a subject is settled on, one then turns to his or her to the United Kingdom. And that's kind of just generally speaking the first point, why it's so important to settle on a university subject now. The second one, beyond being sort of constrained to do so by the actual parameters of applying to the higher education system in the United Kingdom, is that one's schooling, one's A-levels in particular here, are in essence going to restrict where that person can apply. The reason for that being the way things work in the United Kingdom with reference to academic criteria, application criteria, is that one's academic suitability for a course is based almost exclusively on, in particular, the A-levels that they have. And so the argument naturally follows that if you're applying for a science course, you should have the relevant science and maths qualifications at A-level, okay? It's not like, someone who's done maybe, history, psychology, and religious studies at A-level suddenly turns around and says, you know what, I'm going to be applying for natural sciences at Cambridge. It doesn't work that way. So one of the second similarly or equally important point about selecting a subject is that whatever one hopes to or decides to settle on, it's not only based or constrained or constricted by UCAS, the UK higher education system, telling you you only have basically one course to settle on, one topic to settle on, and only 5 choices, 5 universities that offer that subject. It's also, as it were, sort of forced upon you to select a particular subject of study based on your A-levels that one is currently taking, okay? So look back at your A-levels, if you're doing maths and sciences, and say, okay, based on this, well, where can I actually apply, right? What subjects, what courses can I actually apply to based on my A-level studies? Now, for many people, it's not actually a big question, a huge question. The simple reason being that in all likelihood, during the course of one's A-level studies, the student knows, generally speaking, say, if they're doing sciences and math at A-level, they're more than likely going to be doing a science or something math related, maybe engineering, perhaps computer science. So they're already starting to think about a natural subject, right, that complements what they've done at A-level. Regardless, it's still crucial, going all the way back to lower 6, to start thinking about these questions. Where can I study based in particular on the fact that the system is, in essence, forcing me to choose one course, and B, whatever that course might be, I need to ensure that I actually have the A-levels that are required in order to even to take that course, okay? And to that end, we're ultimately advising the following steps, right? Looking at gathering information about particular colleges, faculties, and departments. Double checking as well employability, the placement record of a UK university afterwards. It's all about research. I have to honestly say, as a consultant, the bulk of my work pre-application, it might sound obvious, but I'll say it nonetheless, is sitting down with students and actually doing this sort of research, looking at their academic background, telling them, look, this is the lay of the land if you're applying to the UK here, right? This is what you're sort of forced down. These are your options accordingly based on your background. What, if we do have options, presumably, appeals to you most, right? And I guess in essence, that's the big philosophical question that any student starting already at lower 6 needs to answer. What really most appeals to you subject-wise? And in order to answer that question, we also need to answer, what have I done that allows me to pursue that subject at university? Now, I've mentioned A-levels, I've mentioned predicted grades. Predictions are, I would say, not 100% what are going to get you in, but they're sort of 90%, okay? And I'd probably even a bit more than that, I have to admit. Predictions are actually issued by the school. Certainly under normal circumstances, the way it would work is that obviously the school prepares the students to sit a series of examinations. Those examinations, tests, laboratory work, etc., is then reviewed by a particular A-level examination board, right? An independent sort of set of markers. And those markers in turn are ultimately going to decide the actual grade that comes out in August of a student's upper sixth. But prior to the actual marking by the examination boards under normal times, it's the school that's ultimately going to have the biggest influence on where the student can realistically apply. And this is because it's the school that makes internal predictions, an assessment based on work to date and potential of where the student is expected to finish grade-wise at A level in his subjects, right? And this is so important for students to really start grasping as early as that summer or September, really, no later. In fact, arguably, if a student is very serious about Oxford or Cambridge that has an October deadline of upper sixth, he or she, the student, should be having discussions with their school, probably by no later than spring of lower sixth, with reference to their actual grade projections, right? And bottom line, thinking, look, what are my predictions? The best way to start is simply by saying, am I in a position for the school to sit me down and say you're doing maths, biology, and chemistry. Johnny, we think that A star is definitely achievable for you. It's crucial to understand that. Why? Because as I've been saying, a major criterion for suitability to a course in the UK is based on A levels. And those A levels, as we see with the typical offer, for example, here, I believe this is Nottingham. It is Nottingham. A star, AA to A star, A star, A star. This is information that a university is publishing, is letting out there, informing potential applicants of. It's in essence telling them this is a benchmark. If you're serious about applying for chemistry in this example, your prediction should be roughly between A star, AA. We normally stick with three predictions. The reason for that being is that the bulk of students, even if they start with 4 A levels, do normally finish with 3 A levels. So at least with regard to applying to the UK here, it is crucial that by the spring of lower sixth, a student is already having discussions with the school on what these predictions are going to arguably look like, especially if they're in a position seriously to apply to Oxford or Cambridge. Because by September of upper sixth, they need to know almost for certain that the school is indeed going to commit on their side of the UCAS form to say, yep, we do feel confident, right? A star, A star, A is definitely what we think that you're ultimately going to finish with here. So if they didn't, look at it this way. If the school was not in a position or comfortably to issue or extend that prediction, the student's chances of mounting a serious application to his or her university of choice is all but squashed, for the simple reason that whilst there is, and we'll get into this, some leeway oftentimes into sort of what a university publicly states they want, and what I think, more informally when it comes time to actually viewing the applicants of a given application window, except if the student's predictions are way below what the typical set of offer in this case here is, the likelihood of them being accepted is basically nil. Okay, so again, it's crucial that we understand, in part, it's almost like a collaborative effort between the school and the student, starting already towards the end of lower sixth here, namely with understanding what the school is most comfortable with predicting. Having that conversation then also really helps, because it might really at that point highlight certain weaknesses and give the student a sort of last chance period through the summer and maybe last minute through the fall to correct any weaknesses that he or she might have. So they might say, Johnny, you're sort of, I know you want an A, but right now you're at sort of B grade work in your maths. it kind of sets, as it were, a rallying call. Look, are you ultimately going to double down, do the extra work, ensure that by the end of the summer, when the school typically does resit you or test you again, you find that your grades have actually shot up more than predicted. Perfect. Now the school is more comfortable with issuing that A-level, A grade prediction. You know, that a situation like that is something that can very well happen. And oftentimes really boils down to understanding how badly a student wants it, right? So it's quite helpful to have these prediction discussions at an early stage with the school. In fact, I would say it's all but essential to really understand most seriously where a student is able to apply to when it comes time to actually doing the application. I've gone through most of this already. What I would say, though, is that, and I've said about the predicted grade and the minimum offer, and this oftentimes is used or implies what's called a typical or conditional offer and the actual or unconditional offer. Just to reiterate, so we're 100% clear here, the predicted grades that a school issues a student are ultimately going to help decide where he applies, and in turn, with those predictions, the universities that he's applied to, whether or not those universities are happy to extend to him a conditional offer. It's called conditional because the offer is actually based on predictions, and predictions themselves are conditional. They say, you know, Johnny is expected, in so many words, to finish with AAA. Okay, fine. He's written a convincing statement. The school seems to be really supportive of his application. That's fine. We're happy to give him a conditional offer of acceptance into our university, subject to actually obtaining those. Now, sometimes it might even be a little bit lower, but let's just say, for the sake of argument here, we're going to give you an offer based on your predictions. You know, what that really means is that you have X number of months between the issuance of the conditional or the typical offer to the time that all your exams are finished and your grades are ultimately published in August, to ensure that you do everything within your power to actually obtain those predicted grades. Once the student obtains those grades in August, normally it happens automatically on UCAS, the conditional offer becomes unconditional. It means, hey, you've satisfied what we wanted from you. Congratulations, you can now begin the matriculation process into our university. I've been also talking about the actual bar, as it were, the criteria, the A-level criteria that universities require. And I've been speaking about them in terms of A-level grades, AAA, BBB. Here we have Greenwich, BBC. So as not to be confused, because oddly enough, I have to admit, sometimes annoyingly and unnecessarily, UCAS and a university will typically speak about academic requirements, not just or in A-level grade terms, like you must have 3 Bs in order to be seriously considered for this application. They'll speak about it in terms of achieving a certain number of UCAS points. Tariff points is what they're also called. So in this case, 104 UCAS points or tariff points is what Greenwich wants, including 3 A-levels. Now, for most people, you're normally going to have, and I think we have another slide here that elaborates on this, the bulk of your tariff points are really what, in essence, your British curriculum is valued at points-wise for university entry. The bulk, if not all of that, is actually going to come via your A-level grades, okay? And we see here with A-level and Cambridge per U as well, what those A-level grades do translate to points-wise or convert to points-wise. I would say that it hasn't been helpful that UCAS seems every number of years to be in a habit of actually changing what the tariff points are worth. It also doesn't help that the majority of individuals, or ultimately of universities, are ultimately going to base and in turn extend their offer to a student in terms of A-level grades that they need. But nonetheless, the student might, at any point during their research or after they've applied and received a response from university, hear or see mention of UCAS tariff points. They're just another way of speaking of the academic requirements that are needed for entry. But I think hopefully for the sake of ease, most of us can focus almost exclusively on what A-level grades I ultimately need here. We have some other examples really of what a particular curricula, that one could take and what points those curricula or any one of these curricula equates to. One thing, presuming here, of course, that we are probably just talking exclusively about students sitting British A-levels is, Duke of Edinburgh, which is a very nice complementary extracurricular activity, is not assigned any points, not academically, because it's not considered an academic pursuit. I'll leave most of these other ones to the side, but what I would point out, though, is that many students undertake, in addition to A-levels, an EPQ. In essence, it's a sort of a foray into academic research and writing at university level. And this can academically complement, it adds additional value, academic value, to the A-levels that a student is taking. So it is worth highlighting here in this particular instance, if a student is doing A-levels and or they're considering taking EPQ, definitely do it, because it does add academic weight to one's application. And in fact, sometimes an EPQ might be, for example, the decider between accepting student A that has, say, 3 A-levels for a particular course, and student B that also has 3 A-levels. Student A might have done the EPQ and received top marks in his research paper. Student B hadn't. And accordingly, the university feels that student A merits the place over student B. This slide here kind of focuses on that period where we have a fairly firm idea of the students' predictions. And we've been doing research into a particular course of study. And arguably, we have a long list now of universities. So the question becomes, from that long list, where do we whittle it down, or how do we whittle that long list down to 5 choices? And a rule of thumb is oftentimes, well, something like this. Say the student has AAA, or those are his predictions. What we oftentimes recommend is that we sort of have a reach your top choice that might normally demand an A-star AA. Your second and third choices would normally be bang in line with your predictions. So if Edinburgh, for example, and St. Andrews want 3 A's in Scotland, and your predicted 3 A's in your particular course of study, great. But by contrast, maybe Imperial wanted A-star AA. So in this instance, we could suggest, look, nothing really to lose here. Use Imperial as a top choice. Put Edinburgh and St. Andrews as your second and third. And then for your fourth and fifth, which are in essence your backup or safeties, we might want to start looking further down the list of universities in terms of what they want academically, right? So we might have a Nottingham that is happy with an AAB. We might have a Goldsmiths, for example, in London that's happy with ABB. If you're happy with the areas, we've done the research into the universities, we know that ultimately that university can give you a rewarding academic and personal experience, fine. Well worth putting down. It's also quite sensible, of course, because you never quite know, unfortunately, whether, at least at a certain stage of applying, whether or not you, as the student, are actually going to achieve your predictions. So it's always wise to be more cautious than, let's say, optimistic here. Okay, how to apply? Well, to be honest with you, UCAS, for better or for worse, is fairly simple. There are very little bells and whistles, and it hasn't really changed much in a long time. It's a fairly standard, in fact, it's a fairly simplistic application form. Basic biographical information, You'll notice as well as from the student's point of view or the families or the consultant's point of view, that the form really is just focused on ascertaining what the person's biological background is, contact information, their academic history, normally going back to and including, say, IGCSEs or GCSEs. The student will need to manually upload any grades that he's achieved, whether it's say IGCSEs, perhaps an IELTS score, for example, and this is importantly as well, where he would upload his A-levels, his current A-levels, and what his predictions would be. Okay. There's a second side, as it were, to the UCAS form that the student doesn't see, and this is actually is the school side. Normally, when the student is opening a UCAS form, he's asked immediately whether or not he's going to register or affiliate his application with his or her school. 9 out of 10 times, the answer is yes, and it makes things rather easier for everybody involved. The school is immediately notified, and they know exactly that Johnny's applying, or he's in the process of applying to the UK. Once Johnny has finished his side of the application, which includes his statement, the school then needs to fill in theirs. And in essence, it's a reference letter and predicted grades. So it's confirmation that he is indeed a student there, that he is in line to achieve these predicted grades, and that knowing him and knowing in general, academically and otherwise, we do feel that this is a very wise choice that he's taken, namely, for example, applying for mechanical engineering in the UK. Okay. But it's an otherwise very simple form that really, for better or for worse, doesn't really allow the student to do a lot of talking or persuading. Academically, it's really all based on, say, fifth form IGCSE performance and A-level performance. Non-academically, it's also based on the statement. So when the student is setting down his reasons for applying, his readiness, what he's done, typically during his A-levels, any extracurriculars, any additional work he's done academically or otherwise. But again, all the while, the focus really being academic, the focus being, here are the reasons why I feel I am suitable for this specific university course of study. So there's a chance for the student to allow his or her voice in, but it's still rather limited, especially given the constraints, and also the fact that this is an appeal to, in essence, all universities, not just any one particular university. It's Johnny making his case that he's ready and prepared for engineering. Okay, not engineering at University X. To go into a bit more detail, the statement is crucial because it's really trying to use a limited space to add a narration, so to speak, to the application. So what beyond the academic side, what beyond the letter of recommendation from the school shows us that the student is ready, mature enough, academically capable enough, passionate enough to apply for this particular course of study. It's odd in a way because, I think oftentimes it's sort of a deceptively complicated piece of writing. It's one essay that people oftentimes think I don't need to revisit or proofread or draft, make multiple drafts of. But when you consider that you only have 47 lines, roughly 500 words, to explain why you are suited for a course of study. Now, this isn't just one statement of the sort that's used to appeal to second or third tier universities. The same statement would be used when applying to Oxford, Cambridge, any of the G5, for example. One realizes I need to convey my readiness for the course without ultimately, appealing to any specific university, or without ultimately under or overshooting or selling myself, maybe by embarking on tangents or trying to pick certain academic arguments that are irrelevant here. So I think for that reason, there's a certain complexity to the statement that's oftentimes overlooked or underappreciated by students. So why, right, when writing that statement, why are you applying? The student, of course, in his own words, is expected to express or list the reason for the interest in the subject, their knowledge in it. So hopefully they would have done A-levels in particular, perhaps taken on an additional summer course or intersectional courses. They might have done Olympiads or online sort of self-paced e-learning work via Coursera, Udemy, etc. They would oftentimes try to tackle one or two particular concepts or topics that are probably going to be discussed to obviously a more complicated level at university. But in discussing a famous writer or a subject that maybe they really got stuck into during an EPQ or during a particular part of their A-level, it demonstrates an actual technical grasp of the subject. It's stuff like that is going to demonstrate the why, right? Why they're interested in it, why they think they're ultimately capable and ready for this course at university level, okay? Naturally, if there are any exceptional circumstances for this to the student, they drop out, they might have had to take a year out, maybe they were sick for a while, perhaps they had to resit an A-level. Of course, that would ultimately be or have to be acknowledged explicitly in the statement itself. I've already touched upon really this subject here about why they feel they're ready, right? What did I do in preparation? Beyond the points that specifically link a student to their intended course of study, the statement is also an opportunity, certainly towards the end, for the individual to say a bit more about themselves. It shows more of a comprehensive profile. They're not just a one-trick pony. They're not just good at maths. They're not just good at sciences. I feel that very often, particularly international students, make the mistake of just focusing on the academics, but even worse than that, just focusing on an interest, say, in maths and only maths, or an interest in maths and only science, but not ultimately taking those extra lines to discuss any extracurriculars, any other passions or hobbies, and being able to, even if they're not directly related to the course, say, you know what, doing Duke of Edinburgh, or undertaking these, or attending these clubs or societies, or doing Model UN, or what have you, okay, ultimately allowed me to develop certain skills and abilities and develop perspectives that, of course, I feel confident I'm going to be able to translate or transfer to my university studies. So it rounds out the essay by saying, yes, of course, the focus here, as I've duly explained, is on my abilities in, say, engineering. But look at how much more dynamic I am as an individual. And I'm really trying to sell you that whole package in order to ultimately, say, I am worth taking on as a student. So what happens after applications are submitted? Well, again, if we're applying in October, say for Oxford or Cambridge, almost immediately thereafter, the student would have to sit an entrance exam. We didn't really go into it in detail. It could kind of be a bit of a complicated subject, but if anybody had specific Oxbridge questions, for example, I'd be very happy to answer them later. I think since admittedly Oxbridge applicants are a minority, we're going to focus on the normal round of applicants here. What that means is that most applications are submitted by December, sometimes as very late as January 15th, which is the absolute deadline. But most schools insist, and rightly so, that students submit their application by November, December, even those students that have no intention to apply to a specialized course. Answers could come in almost immediately. I mean, I've had a student, for example, receive an answer in less than 24 hours. Every university puts or issues, their offers on their own time. Admittedly, they have until, I believe, June 10th or so. It does change, especially with the pandemic this last year or two. Normally, most offers are sent out, though, between December and March, okay, after the application is submitted. And that gives the student a few months there to really make a decision on what their first and second or their firm and insurance choices are going to be. So fortunately, they're not immediately pressed to think, oh, I need to respond within 5 days. It gives them time in particular to make sure that their academic progress is going according to plan, so that they still are, most importantly, still hitting the targets needed per their predictions. It also is a period, and because one of the reasons why it's such an extended period is because once you've applied, once you've made your decision, you can't really change it, okay? Certainly not before exam results are issued in August. There are a number of reasons for that, but the thing to focus on here is just that the choice that you make, in essence, between, say, March and June, depending on when all 5 universities finally reply to you as a student, is, in essence, treated as basically almost final, absolute. You're making that decision now, and subject to you satisfying or not satisfying your grades in August, you're kind of signing your life away, right, to that university, your first or your second choice. So you really want to make sure that you know what you're getting yourself into. Take that extra time, have those conversations with yourself, with your family, with a counselor, whether it's at the school or outside the school, a consultant, for example, and see whether or not you're in a position to really settle on what your first and your second or your firm and insurance choices are. It's quite a nail-biting time between making that firm and insurance choice, your first and second choice, and getting your results. Results in August come at you, I don't want to say out of the blue. I mean, you normally know it's second, it's actually the 10th this year, if I'm not mistaken, of August. It's always August, though. And there's little to no indication prior to the release of the date of the grades, that you know what you're going to get. Now, many universities, as should be expected, particularly the very top, if they have extended offers to individuals, and those individuals in turn return with grades that are below the offer, universities are more than likely going to say, sorry, you failed the offer, you cannot come here any longer. UCAS normally takes the sting out, as it were, that rejection, when they automatically update your profile when you sign in to track your application. But sometimes it doesn't, not at least right away, which means that a student is left to frantically pick up the phone, try to call his or her first and second choices here, and see whether or not they've accepted him. Now, as I said in one of the bullet points here, sometimes even if a student has fallen just shy of his predictions, it doesn't necessarily mean that his university of choice is not going to accept him. It's not immediately obvious, I have to say, as I've just been alluding to on UCAS. But if the student is proactive and on the day of results jumps on the phone, speaks, and it is the phone, it's old school, as we say, calling up the university admissions and saying, I'm sorry, I didn't get my grades, but I just wanted to make sure that you'd still consider me. If you're about a grade or so, or or half a grade, say if it's an A, not an A star, but an A. Many universities, so not all, many universities are going to sort of cut you some slack. But admittedly, I think we're looking here at situations that involve students that are probably applying to universities outside the top 10. The fact of the matter is, especially nowadays, especially because of, in essence, what's a backlog due to the pandemic, universities are oversubscribed in most courses. So any opportunity that they have to reject a student, if they'll find it, okay. So unfortunately, I can't go into this conversation, this presentation, as I might have done 2 or 3 years ago, and say, oh, if you're a grade or 2 off, don't necessarily worry. I think most universities are going to understand. I think the situation is very different now. And what we find is that most of the very top universities will really give you no room, no leeway. There's no room for error, okay? What happens then? Well, if both your firm and insurance reject you, then you fall into what's called clearing. Let's see if I have... Now, clearing is not a nice situation to be in. Clearing is, in essence, the process of what I just said, phoning up other universities that you didn't apply to, saying, I missed my marks elsewhere. Do you still have space in the course, in this course? Here are my A-levels. Now, some of them might over the phone be quite happy with that and say, yeah, we'll take you, jump back on UCAS, put us in, and give us a few days or a week, and we'll extend the formal offer. Some might say, we'll consider you, but you might need to write a specific personal statement for us. Now, some of us as well might ultimately find that the university will just pick up and say, no, thank you very much for your interest, but we just don't have the space, or we're not open for clearing. And sadly, it's very difficult to know, in fact, certainly before July of that year, what universities are actually open for clearing. And I should also tell you that normally the very top universities simply do not open for clearing. This applies as well to the counterpart to clearing in August, which is called adjustment as well. And adjustment is the situation where you actually do better than predicted. And you might want to phone up a university to see that you perhaps didn't apply to because you didn't think that as a student you would be applying seriously, you were mounting a serious application to that university. Well, you got your grades back, you did better than expected, cool. Will the university accept my application now? Uncertain. Certainly before clearing, before results day, it's nobody aside from that, not even the university itself really can make that decision, because they need to see ultimately what their individuals, the individuals that ultimately were issued with conditional offers first, how they fared, and whether or not they ultimately went ahead and decided to go with their course. So it's almost like a one in, one out system for even those universities that ultimately are open to taking students via clearing or adjustment. It's based so much on how people that are otherwise otherwise reserved the place done, and whether or not, in addition to that, even if they have satisfied their conditional offer, they actually wish to take that place and begin studies there. And answers to these questions really simply cannot be made until August. In an ideal world, it's something that no student goes through. And I think even for students that very often are unsure of their predictions, whether or not in particular they will ultimately achieve them, those students that have actually done their research and put time into applying would have normally had an insurance. They would have normally thought about that by way of having their fourth or their fifth choice come in at least a couple grades below what's predicted, just in case. Okay, for that reason, that perhaps hopefully by the time you're in a position to make that firm and insurance choice, which is much closer to your final exams, you would know much more confidently where you stand in terms of your A-level grades. And so with a much more informed or knowledgeable position, make that first and second affirmative insurance choice and avoid clearing or adjustment altogether. Clearing suggestions, basically, if you could avoid it, please do. I think I've gone over most of these points already. And again, what I would say here is that if people have any particular concerns or questions regarding clearing or adjustment, to please let me know, or let Eve know. And I'll be happy to answer any specific questions you might have. Visa enrollment. So very quickly here, I just wanted to quickly add, it's a topic that, to be honest with you, again, is also quite nail-biting in the sense that most students, if they require a visa, tier 4, typically cannot really begin the formal visa application process until they're issued a CAS. And that CAS is really a visa sponsorship letter issued by the university of choice, the one that, their firm choice, the one that ultimately gives them an unconditional letter. That sadly doesn't really happen until August. So we find ourselves scrambling to work on visa applications from then onwards. But what I would normally say is that the system is fairly predictable. And so long as you have your offer and in particular, you have your English result if you need one, and very often you do. And that's something that I didn't really spend much time on, but I'm happy to clarify as well if people have questions. It should be something that's very quickly sort of put together and processed for you in time for matriculation here. So it's a formality, and it's one that obviously you need to budget time and other things for. But once you have that CAS in mid-August, you should be assured that the process should be a fairly swift one for you. Right, I think that's it for me, Eve. So again, I'm very happy to take any questions if people have them.
Sure. We do have some Q&A, but maybe we can talk about the service that you are currently offering. So Cognate UK, I do know them from my previous dealings with some of the Chinese schools, and they're really, really good in advising schools in China primarily before, but now they have branched into also helping international students in the UK, specifically going to university. So you can do university counseling, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So Cognate UK, in essence, is the student-specific services branch now, if you will, of EFEC. And EFEC indeed was, the company goes back over 15 years, and it focused particularly on curricular development and business development between schools, engagements between Chinese schools, mainland Chinese schools, and British schools, particularly in the southeast of England. Now what we've done is say, look, there's clearly, I think, a need for more tailored, more first tier, if you will, first rate admissions, counseling, career coach development, academic support, etc. And that's in essence what we're here to do.
Okay, sure. So yes, so if you want to speak to Dan about like maybe having a consultation about your kids, they are now currently maybe in the GCSE finishing for the summer, maybe you want some planning for the university or what they should do, feel free to contact Dan. Yes, so down there on the bottom, you've got the WeChat of Cognate UK. You also got the telephone number. Can they reach you on this telephone number by WhatsApp? Just wondering.
That is a good question. No, not on that number. It's a landline number. Okay. But what I'm happy to do, Eve, actually, I could share our WhatsApp, our mobile number, which I didn't do there. Yeah. And that one definitely does have WhatsApp service.
Sure. So no problem. That's great. So now I've got a few questions, not many. Okay, so the first one, What does clearing round mean? So that's the first. The second question is it possible to choose subjects that I'm good at to study in A levels, but not necessarily link it to my university courses? The subjects that I'm interested in might not be able to help me to get good grade. So would this be a solution to achieve higher grades for uni applications?
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. Um, I'll just very quickly go back to clearing. As I said in the slides, clearing in essence happens August. It happens in essence. It technically opens in July. The reason for that being that certain curricula issue their results, most notably the IB, the International Baccalaureate, issue their results in July. But the bulk of clearing cases happen in August once A levels are released. And in essence, it's the process where a student fails to achieve their first and second choice conditions, and in essence is left without a university. So they need to scramble mid-August, in this case, if they have A levels, to phone up universities that hopefully will accept people through clearing. Now, helpfully, UCAS, the site, does have a clearing page, and a student and oftentimes their school and or their consultant will jump on that to verify exactly what universities are open during clearing. I think it's important to note here, one of the oftentimes overlooked conditions of clearing is that a student cannot, in essence, reapply to a university that he's already applied to via UCAS and has either rejected himself, right, because he hasn't identified them as a firm or an insurance, or has been rejected by a university, right? So they failed to meet a firm and insurance choice. So, let's use a simple case. If the student was rejected by Edinburgh and Warwick, and before then he rejected the offers that were given to him by Glasgow and Durham, okay, he can't call back Warwick and Durham or Glasgow and whatever my other university example was there and say, oh, can you actually please take me for another course, for example? It doesn't work that way. So be very careful as well. Another piece of advice when looking at your shortlist is to say, okay, well, and making that firm an insurance choice, right? That shortlist, your first and second choice, once offers have been received. Am I okay with saying goodbye forever to these choices that I said no to? Am I okay with also saying goodbye forever to these other two choices, my first and second choice, if I somehow fail to meet the offers? So clearing is bottom line, clearing is a very nasty process, and I really try my best to help students avoid it at all costs.
Okay.
Regarding the second question, sorry, yeah.
No, the second question, yes, please, yes.
Yeah, the second, that's a very good one. The problem, so to speak, is I think if we were looking at, say, for example, applying to the US, fine. Do the subjects that really appeal to you most, that you really have a love for, and you could be able to talk on and on and on about in your American applications. Unfortunately, we're not, right? So here we're thinking about just applying to the UK. And in the UK, as I was trying to make clear earlier, there's a very strong connection, right, between the A levels that you take and the courses that you're open to apply to at university. There are a few exceptions to the rule now. So what we're seeing at some universities nowadays are more open-ended general education courses. So actually, Warwick in particular comes to mind, where it allows students to apply to a university without necessarily specifying a course, an intended course of study. So the university gives them an extra year to kind of figure it out while they're there. It's not foundation. And it might be a course, this sort of broader general ed course, might be something worth considering by students that maybe are still kind of struggling at A level to really figure out what they want to do, or maybe, you know, they've been saddled with one or two A levels that they're just not really strong in, and they know that they probably don't want to, you know, pursue at higher level, at university level. So I guess my immediate recommendation there is that, look, if you're kind of stuck with certain A levels that you don't like, but certain others that you do, and maybe you could get good grades in, then you might want to at that point look into more of these broader general ed courses that are cropping up in the UK. They're still kind of a minority, but there are some good universities out there that offer them. Certainly, you know, I think Durham comes up. Some of the Scottish universities will also offer a similar sort of pathway. So I guess the point is there, you know, you can't rule out university higher education, although it's certainly a more you know, time-consuming case here. Really trying to find those universities that would accept an individual with that academic background.
Cool. And I think I might have got the last question here.
Okay.
So the question is, can overseas students choose any subjects they want? I think I'm going to explain a little bit of the background of this question. So a lot of the students want to study something medicine or medical subjects. And for medicine, it's very well known that because of the NHS and the work permit situation, medicine actually limits the overseas applicants' numbers. So do you know any subjects that might have similar restrictions?
Yeah, I mean, I guess medicine is the biggest culprit. We're probably looking at as well at law would be a case, maybe architecture, depending on where they apply. At university level, I would say generally, especially I think if you're applying from Hong Kong, it's not as sort of restrictive in terms of what some of the particular science courses you could apply to as well. So I would say that, truth be told, there aren't actually too many specialized courses that could be maybe in a way sort of discriminatory, right, against international students. I think, you know, the likes of medicine and law are kind of the exception to the rule.
Okay, so probably I think I'm going to wait maybe a little bit more and see if there is any more questions, and then we will kind of end this session. Oh, Dan, do you want to get any of your contacts ready? So like any WhatsApp, any emails for you to so that they can contact?
Yes, absolutely. Would I be able to share this through the chat?
You can type immediately on this slide as well, if that's easier.
Oh, yes.
Or you can show us the website as well. There's another way.
Yes. Now I need to, because I don't remember my number. This is my, what do we have here?
Oh, I never remember my work mobile. Don't worry, you're not.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a good thing. But where we go? Here we go.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
You missed one digit there.
Oh, I'm sure I did. I'm surprised I was. Well, what do we have? 7776.
Ah, perfect.
There we go.
7. Okay, so this is Dan's WhatsApp. If you have further questions or any queries, especially when everyone is going to come back to Hong Kong for 21 days quarantine and you're looking to find something for them to do, you're welcome to ask them to contact Dan. And thank you very much, Dan, for today.
Sure.
Thank you so much. We got a good audience today, I must say. It's really good. So thank you, everyone. I am going to end the session here. So thanks again. Speak soon. Bye.
Take care, everybody. All the best.
Yep. Bye.